One rookie changed everything, and the numbers barely explain it. Caitlin Clark didn't just break WNBA records in assists and three-pointers. She out of college basketball. Sensation Caitlin Clark, she broke the NCAA women's all-time scoring record, turned empty arenas into sellouts, lifted league-wide attendance by nearly 50%, and forced opposing cities to expand venues just to contain demand. But the story doesn't stop there. A league already under tension was suddenly divided over credit, attention, and control of the spotlight. Then came something no one expected. Taylor Swift entering the narrative, turning courtside appearances into global cultural events. What followed blurred the line between sport, celebrity, and movement, as women's basketball exploded into mainstream attention overnight. But was this organic growth or something far bigger unfolding in real time? The rookie who changed everything. Let's start with the numbers because the numbers are extraordinary. When Caitlin Clark stepped onto the court for the Indiana Fever in the spring of 2024, nobody in the history of professional women's basketball had ever done what she proceeded to do across a single rookie season. And she became the heavy favorite for Rookie of the Year with her name even starting to creep into all WNBA territory. By the time the final buzzer sounded on her first year as a professional, Clark had set the NBA rookie record for assists in a season with 337. She had set the rookie record for three-point field goals, made in a season with 122. She had become only the second player in league history to record multiple triple-doubles as a rookie, and she did it twice. In a league that had been producing elite talent for nearly 3 decades, a 22-year-old from Ames, Iowa arrived and made everyone look twice. But the numbers that really told the story in 2024 were not the ones on the stat sheet. They were the ones at the turnstiles. Consider this. Just 1 year before Clark arrived, the Indiana Fever were averaging roughly 4,000 fans per home game. 4,000. It was one of the lowest home attendance figures in the entire league. Then Caitlin Clark was selected number 1 overall in the WNBA draft. With the first pick in the 2024 WNBA draft, the Indiana Fever select Caitlin Clark, University of Iowa. And everything changed overnight. By the end of her rookie season, the Indiana Fever had drawn 643,343 fans across 40 games. The highest combined home and road attendance figure in WNBA history. The next closest team had more than 200,000 fewer fans. Let that sink in for a moment. 200,000 fewer. That is not a gap. That is a canyon. That is the difference between a regular season and a phenomenon. What did Clark do to that arena in Indianapolis? She turned Gainbridge Fieldhouse into one of the hardest tickets in American sports. The Fever set a new WNBA record for home attendance in a single season. Road games featuring the Fever were being moved to larger arenas just to accommodate the demand. 3 games that season drew more than 20,000 fans, including a regular season finale in Washington that brought 20,711 people through the doors, the largest crowd for a regular season WNBA game ever recorded at that time. Hey, sold-out crowd in Evanston tonight for the Northwestern women's basketball game against the Iowa Hawkeyes. The league-wide impact was just as staggering. The WNBA averaged 9,807 fans per game in 2024, a 48% increase over the previous season. The entire league saw its attendance rise. Every single team improved. The season produced 154 sellouts compared to just 45 the year before. Overall, it was the highest league-wide average attendance since 1999. A sport that had been fighting for mainstream recognition for over 2 decades suddenly had it because of one player. And can we talk about what she did on television? The 2024 WNBA All-Star Game and regular season produced TV ratings that the league had not seen in years. Fever games consistently drew viewership numbers that made executives at ESPN sit up straight. With the NCAA tournament, the WNBA is out with new TV viewership numbers. It's been the most watched in the league's history, averaging 1.3 million viewers per game. This was not a blip. This was not a one-week curiosity bump. This was a sustained season-long audience that showed up week after week because Caitlin Clark was playing basketball and they did not want to miss a single moment. How does a rookie have this kind of impact? It starts with the 4 years she spent at Iowa, where she became the all-time leading scorer in NCAA basketball history. Men's or women's? A history-making day in college basketball, Iowa's Caitlin Clark became the leading scorer in the NCAA Division I basketball, woman or man. Clark entered the professional league not as a prospect people were hoping would be good, but as someone who had already proved at the highest level of college basketball that she was something different. The 2024 NCAA National Championship game featuring her Iowa Hawkeyes against South Carolina peaked at 24.1 million viewers. The most watched basketball game of any kind since 2019. That audience did not disappear when Clark turned professional. They followed her. What makes this story so compelling is that Caitlin Clark was not handed a ready-made winning team. The Indiana Fever finished 20-20, a .500 record. They lost in the first round of the playoffs. And yet week after week, people packed into arenas across the country just to watch her play, just to watch her compete. When was the last time a player in any sport, sold out opposing arenas as a rookie on a losing team? That is the scale of what happened in 2024. And it opened the door for something even bigger. The league that wasn't ready for her here is where the story gets complicated. Because while millions of fans were falling in love with Caitlin Clark. I love Caitlin Clark, and it's just like worth the time to see her play. And the sport she was reviving, not everyone inside the WNBA was celebrating. There was tension, there was friction, and there were moments during that rookie season that sparked a national conversation about what was really happening beneath the surface of the league's remarkable growth. The debate was never really about whether Clark was good. She was demonstrably, statistically, undeniably exceptional. The debate was about something more uncomfortable, about who was getting credit for the league's surge and whether some of that credit was being distributed fairly among the women who had been building the WNBA long before Clark arrived. Veterans who had spent a decade in the league grinding through seasons when the arenas were quiet and the cameras were pointed elsewhere found themselves in a strange position. The sport they had given their careers to was finally getting the attention it deserved. But the conversation around that attention was almost entirely focused on one name. There were physical moments too. Clark was flagged for rough play multiple times during the season. And some of those incidents became major talking points on sports media. Opposing players were more aggressive with her on the court than critics felt was warranted. Some analysts pointed to a double standard. That Clark was being targeted in ways that suggested not everyone in the league was thrilled about the spotlight she carried. Others pushed back. They called the wrong foul on the floor show. Several seniors for this Georgia ball club. Very rough fouls at the end. Clark will bury it. Arguing that Clark was simply receiving the physical contact that all-star players receive and that the reaction was overblown. The debate was fierce. And it played out on social media, on sports talk shows, and in locker rooms across the country. What made this tension so significant was that it forced an honest conversation about power, recognition, and representation in women's sports. The players who had come before Clark had built something real. They had kept the 1B alive through years of low ratings and quiet stadiums. They deserved recognition for that. And at the same time, Clark had arrived and done something those same years had been unable to accomplish. She had brought a mass audience to women's basketball in a way that was transforming the sport in real time. Call it the Caitlin Clark effect, or whatever you want to call this. A different kind of energy and excitement swept over Minneapolis on Wednesday. Both things could be true. Both things were true. The league itself seemed caught in the middle. The WNBA was experiencing a financial and cultural windfall, but the internal dynamics of how credit was assigned and how the star-making machinery worked were being scrutinized like never before. Was the league doing enough to lift all of its players on the wave that Clark created? Were the marketing dollars following the story that was actually moving the needle? These were fair questions, and they were being asked. Loudly. And through all of it, Caitlin Clark kept playing basketball. Clark coming down the left side, just so much space. She did not escalate the conflicts publicly. She did not throw fuel on the fire. She showed up to every game, gave everything she had on the court and let the numbers speak. That restraint, that singular focus is part of what made her story resonate so deeply with the audiences who were watching. They were not just watching great basketball player. They were watching someone handle extraordinary pressure with extraordinary grace. And in the stands of arenas from Indianapolis to Washington, that story was drawing people who had never once cared about the WNBA before. When Taylor Swift entered the story, now we get to the part of this story that changed everything. Because Caitlin Clark's season did not just capture the attention of sports fans. It captured the attention of someone with a cultural reach that goes far beyond any stadium, any sport, any league. Taylor Swift had been watching. And when Swift pays attention to something, the world pays attention right along with her. To understand why this matters, you have to understand what Taylor Swift did to the NFL just a year before Clark's historic WNBA season. When Swift began attending Kansas City Chiefs games to support her boyfriend Travis Kelce. On Saturday, January 18th, the cool summer singer was joined by WNBA star Caitlin Clark at Arrowhead Stadium to watch the Chiefs beat the Texans in a playoff game. The ripple effect was immediate and measurable. Networks reported significant viewership increases among young women during Chiefs games. Merchandise sales spiked. Searches for NFL schedules and team rosters went through the roof. A fan base that already loved the sport gained millions of new casual viewers, not because the game had changed, but because someone they adored had shown up in the stands. One person, one cultural force, and the NFL felt it almost instantly. The WNBA was about to feel something similar, because the connection between Taylor Swift and Caitlin Clark was not manufactured by a marketing team. It was real, it was personal, and it grew organically out of a shared appreciation between two generational superstars who happened to move in increasingly overlapping circles. It started in the most human way possible with a concert. Caitlin Clark attended multiple performances of Taylor Swift's Eras Tour, including 2 back-to-back nights when Swift performed at Lucas Oil Stadium. Beavers star Caitlin Clark came back to Lucas Oil Stadium for a second night in a row. In Indianapolis in November of 2024, Clark, a self-described Swiftie who has publicly declared that her favorite Taylor Swift song is Enchanted, showed up as a genuine fan, not as a celebrity seeking a photo opportunity. As someone who had loved this music since she was a kid growing up in Iowa, when Swift's fans spotted Clark in a suite that night, the reaction was electric. People were tossing friendship bracelets up to her. Cameras were pointed her way. Caitlin Clark, the woman who had just sold out arenas all summer, was suddenly the one marveling at someone else's effect on a crowd. What happened next is the part that gave millions of people chills when they read it. According to the Time magazine story that named Clark as the 2024 Athlete of the Year. You know that Caitlin Clark is the Time Athlete of the Year. How is your 24 hours? Taylor Swift had sent Caitlin Clark 4 bags of Eras Tour merchandise along with a handwritten note. In that note, Swift told Clark that she had been inspiring to watch from afar. Swift expressed that she and Travis Kelce were looking forward to watching Clark play in person once the Eras Tour wrapped up. The note was personal, it was warm, and it was the kind of gesture that tells you everything about the character of the person who wrote it. Then came January 18th, 2025. The Kansas City Chiefs were playing the Houston Texans in the AFC Divisional Playoff at Arrowhead Stadium, and in a suite above the field, 2 of the most famous women in America were sitting side by side, chatting, laughing, and embracing every time Kelce made a big play. The NFL's own Instagram account posted the moment with the caption, "Life of 2 ball knowers." The internet did not just react, it erupted. The images of Swift and Clark together in that suite spread across every platform simultaneously. Sports fans, music fans, casual observers who had never watched a WNBA game, everyone had an opinion. Social media lit up with the kind of organic enthusiasm that no advertising budget can buy. Fans wrote that seeing the 2 of them together felt like a cultural event. Some called it the crossover they had been waiting for. The images of the 2 of them embracing after a Kelce touchdown became some of the most shared sports photos of the month. Clark later talked about what the 2 of them had been whispering about in that famous photo that captured the internet's imagination. On a podcast episode with Sue Bird and Megan Rapinoe. Hey everybody, welcome to A Touch More Live from the Helium Comedy Club here in Indianapolis, Indiana. We might have to do that. Please welcome to the show, Caitlin Clark. Clark revealed that she had simply been explaining football rules to Swift. It was a moment of pure, unfiltered humanity. 2 massively famous women in the middle of the biggest cultural moment of the sports calendar just being real people watching a game together. That is what made it so powerful. That is what made it so shareable. You did not need to be a football fan or a basketball fan or a Swiftie to understand what you were seeing. You were seeing 2 women at the top of the world just being themselves. And Taylor Swift being a genuine fan of Caitlin Clark is not a small thing. Swift has demonstrated repeatedly that her endorsement of people and things she cares about carries real-world consequences. When she told her fans to register to vote, registration numbers surged noticeably in the hours that followed. When she showed up in an NFL suite, new audiences discovered professional football. What happens when she shows up publicly, enthusiastically, repeatedly, to express admiration for the most electrifying player in women's basketball? The WNBA was about to find out. The turning point for women's basketball. Understand why the combination of Caitlin Clark and Taylor Swift matters so far beyond the box scores and concert ticket sales. You have to zoom out. You have to look at where women's sports has been and where it is now and ask yourself an honest question. Has anything like this ever happened before? The WNBA has been fighting for mainstream relevance since its founding in 1997. The league has produced some of the greatest basketball players in the history of the sport, players who won Olympic gold medals. Now the two-time NBA champion and four-time Olympic gold medalist is here to tell us more about this. Who dominated professionally for 2 decades, who carried the game on their backs through years when the cameras were not watching. And through all of it, the league survived. It grew modestly, incrementally, through the sheer force of the talent on its courts and the dedication of a fan base that loved it deeply. What happened in 2024 was different in kind, not just in degree. The attendance numbers alone, a 48% increase in a single season, would be considered remarkable in any sport at any level. But it was the cultural weight behind those numbers that made the moment historic. Because for the first time in a very long time, people who had never considered themselves Wendy fans were finding reasons to become one. And 2 of the biggest reasons had names that everybody already knew. The financial implications are just as significant as the cultural ones. The WNBA is in the process of negotiating new broadcast deals and expanding its commercial partnerships. The WNBA and its players' union reached a tentative deal on a new contract. The league announced expansion plans, with new franchises coming to cities like Golden State and Portland. Sponsors that had previously been cautious about investing heavily in women's basketball were suddenly in conversations about major long-term deals. When an arena is selling out, when the television ratings are climbing, when the most talked about person in American sports and the most talked about person in American music are photographed together at a playoff game, the business world pays attention. And there is something even larger at stake here, something that goes beyond revenue and ratings and broadcast rights. There are girls growing up right now, 8, 9, 10 years old, who are watching Caitlin Clark drain 3-pointers from 30 feet. Clark will loft it up there and switch it in with a 3. Who are watching Taylor Swift sit courtside and cheer, who are seeing the 2 most powerful women in their respective fields exist in the same cultural space, celebrating each other, building each other up. What does that do to a generation of young women who are being told, every day, that the things they love and the sports they play matter? It tells them that their heroes are real. It tells them that the ceiling is somewhere they cannot yet see. The WNBA has no choice but to lean into this moment. The league cannot afford to manage this story defensively. The energy that Clark and Swift have generated, separately and together, is the kind of momentum that builds institutions, it builds legacies. Done correctly, this is the moment that the WNBA points to in 20 years as the inflection point. The moment when everything changed, the moment when the question stopped being whether women's basketball would ever be taken seriously and started being how large can this actually get. The cultural revolution of Caitlin Clark. There is a phrase that gets thrown around in sports when someone truly special arrives. They say the player is bigger than the game. It is almost always an exaggeration. Almost always. Caitlin Clark is not bigger than basketball. She is basketball right now. Clark hits a 3. That's the flow. She is the living, breathing, 3-point shooting embodiment of what happens when the right person arrives at exactly the right moment and refuses to play small. And Taylor Swift, who has spent the last decade rewriting what it means to be a woman at the top of the entertainment industry, recognized that. She saw it from afar. She sent a handwritten note. She invited Clark into her world. And then she sat beside her at a playoff game in front of the entire country and hugged her like a friend. That is not a publicity stunt. That is not a brand partnership. That is 2 people at the absolute peak of what human beings can achieve in their fields. Finding something real and genuine in each other. And when something real goes viral, when the authenticity is undeniable, no amount of cynicism can stop it. Think about what the WNBA looks like now compared to 2 years ago. The arenas are full. The television deals are being rewritten. A new generation of fans has arrived. Fans who came for Clark and are now staying for the sport. The 2025 season broke the all-time WNBA single-season attendance record, surpassing 2.5 million fans with weeks still remaining in the regular season. The momentum is not slowing. It is accelerating. And somewhere in all of this, in the sold-out arenas and the viral images, in the handwritten notes and the playoff suite embraces, a story is being written that is bigger than any one game or any one season. It is a story about what happens when talent meets cultural power. When an athlete who is redefining her sport meets an artist who has already redefined hers. When two women who have faced enormous pressure, enormous scrutiny, and enormous expectation choose to lift each other up instead of looking the other way. The WNBA cannot ignore this. It never could. The question was always whether the league would be bold enough to embrace it, to recognize that the wave Caitlin Clark created was not a threat to everything that came before, but an invitation. An invitation for everyone who had loved this sport in the quiet years to finally have their moment in the noise. An invitation for every player on every roster to step into a spotlight that is bigger and brighter than the one they inherited. Clark off the screen, finds some space, and there's a three. Taylor Swift watched what she did, reached out with kindness, and brought another universe of fans along with her. The result is something that has never happened before in women's professional basketball. Something that cannot be manufactured, cannot be duplicated, and cannot be stopped. This is not a moment. This is a movement. And it is only just getting started. Caitlin Clark walked into a league nobody was watching and turned it into the most talked about sport in America. Taylor Swift sent a handwritten note, showed up at a playoff game, and reminded the world that greatness recognizes greatness. The WNBA was never going to be ignored forever. But these two women together, that accelerated everything by a decade. This is not a moment. This is the beginning. Now we want to hear from you. Drop a comment right now. Do you think Taylor Swift showing up to a live NBA game would actually break the internet? Like this video if you believe women's sports is just getting started, and subscribe because what is coming next on this channel is even bigger.